friend. This is the Night Watch. I'm Frank. I have the watch tonight. You don't have to. Every episode is one true night from history, told slow enough to fall asleep to. So pull up your covers, turn off your light, close your eyes, and let the story drift you off. Tonight, Constantinople, May 1453, the last night of an empire, and the longest watch its walls ever kept. It's the first hour of the night, on the 28th of May, in the year 1453. I'm standing on a tower of the inner wall of Constantinople, above the gate of St. Romanus. And below me in the dark there are two cities, one behind me, praying, and one in front of me. I'll be straight with you, because straight with you, I don't lie to each other at this hour. This is the 53rd night of the siege, and it's the last one. Sometime after midnight, everything out there in the dark is going to stand up at once and come to this wall, and by tomorrow evening the oldest empire on earth will have ended. 1100 years, ending on a Tuesday. But here's what I need you to hold on to, you do. And I'll prove it as most of tonight is quiet. Hours of it. Bells and lamplight. And men mending things in the dark. The same as the last 52 nights. And the city itself doesn't end tonight. Cities are harder to kill than empires. This one is still down there right now, this exact minute, 5.5 centuries later, full of sleepers. You can walk this wall tomorrow, whatever your tomorrow is. Touch it even. So you have my permission to drift off anywhere you like. Frank stays either way. That's the arrangement. That's always been the arrangement. Come up on the tower. Mind the step, it's older than most countries. Before the stories, let me show you the room, because you'll be spending the night in it with me, and a guest should know where the blankets are. A watchtower on the inner wall is a stone room the size of a small kitchen, and after 1,000 years of Watchmen, it's furnished the way habit furnishes things. A brazier in the corner, coals banked low because the wind off the Marmara finds every gap in the stones and always has. A horn-pane lantern, a water jar, a bench worn to the shape of men who sat where I'm sitting, gone these many centuries, all of whom, I promise you, complained about the wind. And the log. Every watch keeps a log, and the tower's copy sits on its shelf, and most nights of 1,000 years it has recorded nothing at all. Wind from the south, a cart at the gate after hours, all quiet, volumes and volumes of all quiet. The most beautiful, boring literature ever written, and nobody writes it down anywhere but a wall. Tonight's page is going to be different, and we both know it, and I'll fill it honestly when the time comes. But the brazier doesn't know that. The bench doesn't know it. The room is exactly as warm and exactly as dull as it was on 10,000 ordinary nights, and there's a lesson in that I'll only say once. Rooms don't panic. Borrow the trick from them, settle into the bench's old shape, put your feet toward the coals, and let the wind do the talking for a while. Let me tell you whose wall this is, while the bells are still warming up. 1100 years ago, a soldier emperor named Constantine looked at a modest Greek town on the best corner of the earth, where Europe leans across a strait to touch Asia, and said, "Here." He laid out a capital and gave it his name. And his mother's name was Helena. Tonight, 1123 years later, the man commanding this wall is also named Constantine, and his mother's name is also Helena. First emperor and last, same name, same mother's name, and I promise you, no storyteller arranged that. History did it on its own. It does that more often than people think, and it unsettles historians and comforts everyone else. The city he's defending isn't the city it was. In the great centuries, 500,000 people lived inside this circuit of walls. Tonight, maybe 50,000. The city has gone thin inside its own armor, like an old man in a young man's coat. There are orchards in here, wheat fields inside the walls, between neighborhoods that used to argue about chariot teams. Whole districts have gone back to grass, and the districts that remain gather around their churches the way people gather around fires. But the armor still fits. That's the thing about tonight. The coat still fits. Nobody has ever come through these land walls by force. Not once. Not in 1,000 years. Every power on Earth has tried, and I'll name them for you later, slowly, because a list of failures is a fine thing to fall asleep to. From this height, before full dark, you can read the whole city like a page, so let me read it to you slowly. That's what towers are for. Below us, running away east toward the sea, the Meze, the middle street, the spine of the city, porticoed the whole way, where everything in the world was once for sale. Follow it with your eye through the old forums, each with its worn column, each column with its story, past the dome, down to where the land ends and the lighthouse stands. North, the Golden Horn, black water with riding lights on it, our ships and theirs, uneasy neighbors in the same harbor. South, the Marmara, open sea, the one direction the enemy owns least. And in between, the strangest sight in any great city, green, orchards silver in the dusk, the shapes of vineyards, a shepherd's fire, friend, inside the walls of New Rome, where a district of 500,000 once roared. The city has room to farm itself now, which is either sad or sensible, depending on the hour, and at this hour I find it sensible. A city that can feed itself is hard to starve, and everywhere, moving between the churches, small rivers of candlelight. Processions, you can trace every street in the dark tonight just by the prayers moving along them. That's the whole map. Stone spine, black water, green fields, and light in motion. 1,100 years of empire, readable in one slow turn of the head. Turn it with me once more, and then we'll talk about the man across the valley. Listen for a moment. Not to the city, the other way, out past the moat, into the dark. That low glow spread across the whole horizon like a second sunset that won't finish. That's the camp. The Sultan's army has been out there for 53 days, and nobody on this wall knows the true count, and historians will argue it forever, but call it 80,000 men against our 7. 53 nights I've listened to that camp, and I'll tell you the strange truth. It has a bedtime. Cooking fires bank down. Camels complain and settle. 100 smiths stop hammering, almost together, like an orchestra ending. Tonight it's quieter than it has ever been. The Sultan ordered rest today. Rest and fasting, and no fires beyond need. 2 nights ago, they burned lights around the whole horizon, candles and bonfires from the sea to the Golden Horn, so many that from this tower it looked like the land itself had caught, and the men on this wall could read each other's faces at midnight. And then last night, And tonight, and quiet, on purpose. Armor knows silence means. It means word one is over. It means the waiting is over. Give them burn. The cannon, though, the cannon is asleep. That's the one mercy of tonight. And I'll tell you the whole story of that monster in the third watch. It has earned its own chapter, and its bronze gauze is still warm. Know the man across the valley, friend, because this night doesn't make sense without him, and the caricature they'll draw later, the brute at the gates, misses everything that matters. Memhead, second of the name, is 19 years old, and he is the most educated person on either side of this wall. That's not my flattery. His own court historian, who knew him, wrote it down. He speaks Turkish, Greek, Persian, Arabic, more besides by some accounts. He has Italian painters' work in his chambers and will one day sit for a Venetian master. He keeps scholars the way other princes keep hounds. He has the deeds of Alexander read to him at night. A 19-year-old measuring himself against the only conqueror who started younger. And he has wanted this city his whole short life, the way you want a thing your family has circled for a century and never taken. He was Sultan once already, friend, at 12, when his father stepped aside, and the empire took one look at the boy and talked the father back onto the throne. Nobody forgets that at 19. The men in that camp tonight include the ones who sent him back to the schoolroom. So understand what this siege is. It's not an appetite, it's a thesis. He has spent 2 years preparing it like a scholar. The fortress on the strait, the cannon, the fleet, the roads. Tonight is the defense of that thesis, and the examiners are 80,000, and failure means the schoolroom forever. Patient, learned, and all in. That's what's across the valley. Respect it, and sleep anyway. Now let me tell you a secret, a state secret. No, nor you're exactly the Morim Crippen. Is Enberg to the Evian and the crust Olwyn, and quietly. Every martyr to the Volter ordered fortune Frandom and Carfastine, shopkeeper. Here guard in the story of Radi into the story man added it up a pulled of Jur, and an enfold to need by street made at his friend, and he brought the number to the emperor, and the two of them looked at it and then tell no one. Fewer than 5,000 Greeks. About 2,000 more from elsewhere, Venetians, Genoese, a company of Catalans, one exiled Ottoman prince with his household, 7,000 men to hold 14 miles of wall. Do the arithmetic with me, slowly, the way Francis must have done it. 14 miles, 7,000 men. That's one man for every 10 feet or so, if no one ever sleeps. Which is why the count was a secret, and why the walls matter so much. Stone doesn't need to know the odds. Stone stands there either way. Francis survives tonight, by the way, by the work. I want you to know that going in. He'll be taken and ransomed, and he'll grow old. And write the chronicle where that number finally gets told. The count outlived the counting. Paper usually wins in the end. Remember that when we get to the books in the last watch, because paper is how this story refuses to finish. The bells now, all of them. Have this for a minute, because no one will ever hear it again after tonight. Every church in the city is ringing, and underneath the bronze, the wooden clatter of the Semantron boards from the monasteries, and underneath that, chanting, moving through the streets. They've been carrying the Ike along the walls all day, asking them to hold the line one more summer. And down in the heart of the city, the dome. You'd know it from here even if you knew nothing else on earth. Hagia Sophia, holy wisdom, the largest room human beings had ever built, 900 years old already tonight. Its dome carries a ring of 40 windows at the base, and when the church is lit for a great service, the ring glows, and from this tower, it looks like a crown floating on the dark, and the man who built it is said to have walked in and whispered, "Solomon, I have outdone thee." Here's what makes tonight's service the one history remembers. For 400 years, this city's church and Rome's church have been enemies, real enemies, the kind that riot. There are men in this city who said out loud they'd sooner see the Sultan's turban here than a cardinal's hat. And tonight, all of it is suspended. Orthodox and Catholic are in that room together, one liturgy, sharing the bread they spent 4 centuries fighting over. Enemies of 400 years, praying in one voice, because it's the last Vespers, and everyone knows it. Listen under the bells. There's a hymn moving through the streets tonight, and it's the city's own, and you should know its story because tonight is its 827th birthday, more or less. In the year 626, the last time the city stood this close to the edge, Avars on the land side, Persians across the water, the emperor and army away, the people of this city stood through the whole night in the churches and sang to the Virgin, their champion general, the protectress of the city. And the siege broke. The enemy fleet wrecked in the very water you can see from this tower, and the people sang the hymn, standing up, all night in thanksgiving, and so it's called the Akethist, the hymn you do not sit down for. They're singing it tonight. Every generation between 626 and now has sung it in trouble, and it has always worked, friend, which is the kind of arithmetic faith keeps and history should be gentle with. To thee, our champion and commander, you can hear it when the wind shifts, braided with the bells, 1,000-year-old melody walking the streets in the dark. And here's the strange comfort of it. Whatever happens to empires, songs are very hard to kill. This one is still sung tonight, your tonight, in this same city and around the world, by the descendants of the people singing it below me now. The walls have a maintenance schedule, so does the music. Only one of them was ever going to last forever. The emperor went to that service, stood in the great room with everyone else, made his confession like everyone else, and then he did something the old chronicles all stopped to record. He turned to the crowd, to his commanders and rivals, and he asked their forgiveness. Anyone he'd ever wronged. An emperor of the Romans asking a room to forgive him on the last night of Rome. Then he got on his horse and rode the walls. The whole line, gate by gate in the dark. He stopped at this gate, the St. Romanus, because this is the weak stretch, the valley where the cannon has done its worst, and this is where he'll stand tonight. Not behind the line, on it. His speech to the captains is preserved more or less by a bishop who heard it, and it wasn't long. He reminded the Greeks what city this was. He thanked the Italians who didn't have to be here and were. He said a man dies once and owes God a death, and there are worse purchases to make with it. An old soldier near when the emperor had ridden on said the walls have stood through everything and they'll stand through whatever the summer brings. 53rd night he said it. I've stopped arguing, it's a kind of prayer, and tonight I'd rather stand with it than against it. I'll call the watch, friend, since the bells have finally taken a breath. First watch of the night and the city is praying. First watch of the night and the wall is manned. While the city prays, let me show you what I'm standing on, because you should know the main character of tonight, and it isn't me and it isn't the Sultan. It's the stones. This is not a wall, it's a system, 4 layers deep, and I want you to walk through it with me from the outside in, slow, like the world's least welcome guest would have to. First, the moat, 60 feet across. Cross it, and you're standing at a low breastwork with archers behind it. Get over that, and you're in the outer terrace, a killing yard in front of the outer wall, which is 25 feet of stone with towers every bow shot. Take that wall, somehow, and congratulations, you're now trapped in a second terrace, between 2 walls, with the big one still ahead of you. The inner wall, 40 feet, 15 thick at the base, with 96 towers, and I'm standing on one of them. And from up here, the whole arrangement below looks like what it is, a machine for making armies old. 4 miles of this, sea to sea, shutting off the whole peninsula. It was finished 1,040 years ago, under an emperor who was 12. A boy. His prefect, a man named Anthemius, did the actual work, and I like to think of him some evenings, a civil servant, long forgotten by everyone but the specialists, who built the thing that kept the lamps of this civilization lit for 1,000 extra years. Nobody builds statues to prefects. They should. Let me walk you the wall's length by its gates, friend. South to north, the way the Watch calls them, because a litany of old doors is as good as counting sheep in better company. Start at the sea at the Golden Gate. Marble towers, doors that were once plated gold, the door of triumphs. Emperors came home through it with elephants in the good centuries. It's mostly walled shut tonight. Triumphs have been scarce. North from there, the Gate of the Spring, named for a holy well outside the walls. And hold on to that one, friend, because it has a story I owe you in a few minutes. Then the Gate of Regium, where the wall climbs. Then ours, the St. Romanus, the Soldier's Gate, plainest and most argued over stretch on the line, which is why the Emperor's standard hangs from this tower tonight. Then down into the Lycus Valley, the low ground, the bruise where the cannon works. Then up again to the Gate of Tiresias on the 6th hill, where the land falls away and the wall turns for the palace quarter and the horn. 5 great gates, a dozen small 96 towers, each with a watch, each watch with a log, each log full of 1,000 years of all quiet. Say the names once more with me, slower. Spring, Regium, Tiresias. Old doors in an old wall, every one of them shut and barred and watched tonight. Nearly every one, but that's the 5th watch, and this is the 2nd, and the coals are warm. And here's the wall's best story, better than any battle, the time it fell down on its own, at the worst moment in the world, and what the city did about it. The year 447. An earthquake drops 57 towers in a night, flattens whole stretches of the line, and at that exact moment, moving toward the city with his whole horde, is Attila, the Hun. The actual Attila, the one they called the Scourge of God, and the wall of Constantinople is lying in pieces on the ground. So the city government does the most Constantinople thing imaginable. It goes to the circus factions, the blues and the greens, the chariot racing fan clubs, the hooligans, the 2 mobs who existed to hate each other, and it says, build. And they do. 16,000 of them, rival gangs, working side by side, and they rebuild the entire line, walls, towers, and moat in about 60 days. Attila arrives at full strength, finds the walls standing like nothing happened, and goes to find an easier continent. There's an inscription about it that survives and survives tonight, cut into the stone down the line from here. It says the eparch who drove the work raised these walls in 60 days. And the eparch's name, I swear to you, was Constantine. Another one. This city is bookended, wallpapered, and haunted by men named Constantine, and tonight the last of them is standing at the gate below me in gilded armor. He intends to take off before morning, but that's the 5th watch. We're not there yet. A 1,000 years this system held. Let me give you the list I promised. The roll of everyone who stood where that camp is tonight and went home. It's a good list. Say it slow. The Avars and the Persians together in 626, land and sea at once, while the emperor and the army were away entirely. The city held with what it had, and out of that deliverance came the great hymn they still sing tonight to the champion general, the city's protectress. The Arabs, twice, at the height of their conquering centuries, once for 4 years running, and the second time the city met their fleet with a new invention, a fire that burned on water, poured from bronze siphons. And no, I will not tell you the recipe, because nobody can. The state kept the formula so secret it's now lost forever, which is the best security review in history. The Rus came down the great rivers in their long ships. The Bulgars came overland. Everyone came, everyone left. One asterisk, friend, because you and I don't lie to each other. The city did fall, once, 249 years ago, but not here, not at these stones. It fell from the sea, from the harbor side, and it fell to crusaders, fellow Christians, guests gone wrong, which is its own long, sad story for another night. The land walls, this wall, the one under your feet, never, nobody, in 1,000 years has ever come over or through it while men held it. That's the record the cannon out there was hired to break. The Arab siege deserves its whole story, friend, because it's the wall's finest hour, and it happened in weather like a punishment. Summer of 717, the Caliphate at full tide, the conquering century, and it arrives here with the largest force the city has ever seen, army and fleet together, meaning to end the story. The emperor is Leo, a soldier who took the throne that same spring, and what he has is the walls, the chain, and a secret. The secret is the fire, invented by a refugee engineer a generation before, a liquid that ignites on contact and burns on water, thrown from bronze siphons mounted in the bows of ships. The enemy fleet crowds the strait, the fire ships go out, and men who have crossed deserts and taken 100 cities watch the sea itself catch light. You cannot swim away from it. You cannot douse it. The state guards the recipe so hard that it passes between a handful of minds only, and within a few centuries those minds fail to hand it on, and the formula is lost forever, friend. The best kept secret in history, kept straight out of existence. Scholars still argue the ingredients tonight. Then the other weapon, winter. The winter of 717 comes down like a verdict, snow lying for weeks, and a besieging camp is a terrible place to be poor and cold. By the next summer, the siege is bones and sails going home. The city stood. Europe, some historians will tell you, turned on that fact. The wall you're leaning on held the door for a continent. Now the hard story. The 1204, because I said we don't lie to each other, and the wall's record has one wound in it, and the wound was friendly fire. A crusade, the 4th one, bound for the Holy Land, stops here to settle a bill. It's a long, crooked story of debts, exiled princes, and Venetian shipping contracts, and none of it was supposed to end with what it ended with. Christian knights over the sea will see walls of the greatest Christian city on earth. Not these land walls. No one has ever taken these. They came from the Horn, from the water, up onto the harbor walls from the decks of Venetian ships. and the city that had held everyone out for 8 centuries was sacked by its own communion. The bronze horses from the hippodrome down the hill stand over the door of St. Mark's in Venice tonight. Your tonight, that's where they went. For 57 years the empire lived in exile across the water while Latin knights held the palace. And then, 1261, the taking back. And I promised you this story at the gate of the spring. A Greek general with a small force learned from locals of a passage under the walls near that gate and slipped 50 men through it in the dark while the garrison's fleet was away. They opened the gates from inside. The city came home through a forgotten door. Hold that, friend. This city was lost from the water and won back through a small door in the dark. Doors both ways. Remember it before dawn. Now look down, over the parapet, into the dark between the walls, because the city's real nightly ritual is happening, and it has nothing to do with bells. You can hear them before you see them. Baskets, whispers, timber knocking. Hundreds of people down in the terrace, rebuilding the stockade in the dark again. Here's the rhythm of this siege, the one nobody planned. By day, the great cannon and its smaller cousins pound the outer wall along this valley, and stone that stood 1,000 years comes down in clouds of dust you can taste from here. And every night, every single night, for 7 weeks, the city goes out into the wreck and builds it back. Not as stone, there's no time. As a stockade, timber posts, brushwood, barrels packed with earth, hides stretched over the top, rubble shoveled into the gaps, a wall made of everything, made by everyone. Monks with their sleeves rolled, women carrying earth in baskets, children carrying what children can, 52 nights running. And I'll tell you the strangest thing about the earth and timber wall. It works better than the stone did. Stone shatters when the great ball hits it. Packed earth just accepts it, swallows the shot whole like a pond taking a pebble. The Sultan is said to have sworn that no prophet could have made him believe a wall torn down by day could stand again by morning. He blames sorcery. It isn't sorcery. It's a city that has decided, 52 mornings in a row, not to be finished. Listen to them work. It's the most human sound there is. The man running that stockade is worth a chapter of his own, and he's down there right now, in white armor he had made so his men could find him in the dark. Giovanni Giustiani Longo of Genoa, a professional, born to one of the great sea families, made his name in exactly this kind of impossible work. And in January, while the rest of Christendom was sending this city its regrets, Giustiniani arrived with 2 ships and 700 armored men, paid at his own expense. The emperor gave him command of the entire land wall. He put himself here, at the St. Romanus, the weak valley stretch, where the ground dips and the river Lycus slips under the wall and the towers sit lower than anywhere on the line. Every siege has an address where it will be decided, and every soldier on both sides knows it. And this is it. And he chose it. For 53 days he slept in his armor, rotated his men like a machine, and rebuilt that stockade nightly. The Greeks have a rank for him now, protostrator. And something better than a rank. They believe him. 7,000 men holding 14 miles against 80,000. And the arithmetic only works at all because of where this one Genoese decided to stand. Hold that name, friend. Giustiniani. Near dawn, this whole night is going to turn on what happens to his body in a space of about 10 minutes. Not yet, though. Tonight he's just a white shape in the dark below, telling somebody to brace a timber better. And who else shares the wall tonight? Walk the muster with me, because the roll of who stayed is short and strange and worth the saying. The Venetians stayed by vote. That's a true thing. In the winter, when the shape of what was coming went plain, the Venetian colony met in council, merchants and captains, and voted, formally, to stay and defend the city, and put it in the minutes. And their bailo stands in the palace quarter tonight in armor. Merchants, friend, voting away their profit and maybe their lives in a city not theirs. Though honesty keeps the ledger whole. One February night, 6 ships and 700 souls slipped the chain and ran west without asking anybody. The ones who stayed stood on the seawold and waltzed and watched the sails go small. And stayed. Courage isn't the absence of the other choice. It's watching the other choice sail away and staying anyway. The Genoese of Galata are officially neutral across the water, and unofficially their best man commands our whole land wall, which tells you what treaties are worth against conscience. A company of Catalans holds the old sea palace, a Castilian nobleman who says he's descended from Trojans, which nobody checks tonight of all nights. Orthodox monks with hammers and baskets, and one Ottoman prince, Orhan, a rival claimant sheltered here for years, who knows precisely what dawn brings his family line, standing his stretch of wall with his own household against his own house. Greeks, Latins, Catalans, a Turk. The last army of Rome, friend. Rome always was a hiring city. One more thing about this city before I call the watch, a thing you can't see, because it's under the streets. The city keeps a second city, downstairs, made of water. Constantinople's oldest fear was never armies, it was thirst. A city on a dry peninsula, and every besieger from the Avars on knew it. So the Romans did what Romans do, they overbuilt. Aqueducts feeding underground cisterns, dozens upon dozens of them, and the greatest are like drowned cathedrals, marble moans ball hundred standing in black water, roofs high enough to boat under. Torchlight down there comes back off the water, in rings. The columns were salvaged from older temples, and on 2 of them the carvers set great stone Medusa heads, one sideways, one upside down, and 1,000 years of maintenance men have nodded to them and not asked. Tonight those cisterns are part of the garrison, as much as any man on this wall. 53 days sealed in, and the city drinks. Wells and cisterns full, fountains running, because men who died centuries before the cannon was cast decided their city would never be thirsty. That's what a city is, friend. It's the courtesy of the dead to the living, running downhill through stone pipes. Put your palm flat on the tower, stone. Old ritual of mine, the stone holds the day's sun long into the night. Did you know that? Feels like the wall keeping its own small watch. Second watch of the night and the stockade is mended. Second watch of the night and the water is deep and cold and hard. Now, the cannon. Settle in, friend. This is the story of the machine that's asleep across the valley, and it starts, of all the ways a story can start, with a job interview in this city 1 year ago. A man came to the emperor's court in 1452, a founder, a caster of bronze, from Hungary by most accounts, named Orban. And Orban had a monster in his head. He could cast guns, he said, bigger than any gun yet made, guns that could bring down walls no engine had ever touched. He offered the monster to Constantine first, remember that. The last emperor had first refusal on the instrument of his own ending, and Constantine wanted it. The chronicles say he did. But the treasury of the Romans, which once counted the wealth of 3 continents, could not make the man's salary. They offered a stipend. It wasn't enough to live on. And after months of politely starving, Orban walked out of the land gate, which may have been this one, and took the road west to Edirne, to the 19-year-old sultan. Mehmed asked him one question, the way the story is always told. Can your gun bring down the wall of Constantinople? And Orban, a salesman to the end, said his gun could bring down the walls of Babylon itself. Money was found. Money is always found on the other side. It's an old story, maybe the oldest in the fall of great powers. The weapon was offered to the defense first, and the defense couldn't meet payroll. Nations don't fall to genius, friend. They fall to arithmetic. Before the gun, the fortress, because the siege didn't start in April, it started last summer, upstream, with masonry. The Bosphorus, the throat of the world, the strait that feeds this city grain from the Black Sea. Mehmed's great-grandfather built a castle on the Asian bank. Last spring, Mehmed crossed to the European side, our side, treaty ground, and built its twin. He drew the plan himself, some say in the shape of his own initials, which at 19 you would. 3 great towers, walls 22 feet thick, and here's the detail that ought to worry any defender more than any cannon. It went up in 4.5 months, foundation to finished, in a summer. 1,000 masons, the Sultan on the scaffolds, handing out bonuses, his ministers each assigned a tower and racing each other. The empire that builds like that is telling you something about itself. The Greeks named it fast enough, Bogaskin and Turks call it the straight cutter, or the same word doing double duty, the throat cutter. From its ramparts, guns command the whole channel, and the toll was announced. Every ship stops for inspection. In November, a Venetian grain ship ran the strait rather than stop. Way ships always had, because the sea was free, because it always had been. The gun spoke once. The ship went to the bottom of the Bosphorus, and the crew did not come home, and I'll leave it there. No herald ever read a cleaner declaration of war than that fortress. Stone, friend. Everything in this story is said in stone. What Orban cast that winter, in a foundry at Edirne, was the largest gun the world had seen. Bronze, about 27 feet of it, a barrel a grown man could crawl into. It threw a ball of stone weighing 1,200 pounds, more than half a ton, in the air, at a wall. Getting it here was a campaign in itself. 60 oxen to pull the carriage, 200 men steadying and hauling, road crews sent ahead to flatten the hills and prop the bridges. It moved at walking pace for 6 weeks, and word of it moved faster, which was, of course, part of the point. A weapon that famous is fighting before it arrives. Here's the detail everyone kept, though: the sound. When the great gun speaks, the report rolls 10 miles. Birds drop out of the air, one chronicler swears. In the city, the ground arrives before the noise. A thump underfoot like the earth clearing its throat, and then the sky tears. The chronicler Ducas records that women miscarried at the report. By now, 53 days in, I watch fruit sellers pause mid-argument, wait for it, and resume. The monster has a monstrous weakness. It's slow, hours to cool, to reload. 7 shots a day, no more. 2 weekday, no more. And a few weeks ago it cracked, clean through, and Orban's crews bound and recast and coaxed it back to work. 1/2 ton of stone, 7 times a day, against a stockade rebuilt nightly by monks and grandmothers. That's the whole siege, friend. That exchange rate. The siege proper opened in the first week of April, and I want you to have the first night of it, because that's the night this city learned its new clockwork. April the 12th. The fleet came up the Marmara, hulls past counting, and anchored in the roads north of Galata, and the city watched from the seawalls in silence. The same week, the land army finished spreading itself across the whole horizon you're looking at, tent by tent. Then, the 18th, the first assault. Night, like tonight. Torches suddenly by the thousand, drums out of nowhere, and a rush at the stockade in the Lycus, right below where you and I are sitting. Found at 4 hours in the dark, ladders and grapples, the garrison learning on the job the drill it has now run for 7 weeks. Giustiniani's armored men held the fence line, and the wall answered the way it was designed 1,000 years ago to answer. And by the middle watch, the drums pulled back, and the city had its first tally. The wall holds, even now, even against this. And the bells learned their part that night too. The alarm pattern, wild and fast, every church passing it inward from the walls like a fire brigade passing buckets. The whole city can read that ring now the way you read your own name. 53 days of clockwork since. Cannon by day, repairs by night, probing assaults when the moon serves. A rhythm, friend. Terrible, but a rhythm. Cities can sleep inside any rhythm once they learn it. So can you. Now the sea part of the story, because the siege was nearly over in April, and the whole thing turned on one afternoon of wind. Understand the geography like a gull for a second. The city is a triangle. 2 sides face water, the third is this wall. The northern water side fronts the Golden Horn, the finest harbor on earth, and the mouth of the horn is closed. There's a chain across it, friend, an actual chain. Timber floats carrying great iron links, shore to shore. From the city across to the Genoese tower at Galata, the Sultan brought a fleet of well over 100 hulls, and it could not get past the chain. Then, April the 20th, 4 ships appear from the south. 3 Genoese, carrying men and arms from the Pope, and 1 big imperial transport loaded with Sicilian grain. The entire Ottoman fleet went out to take them. 4 against everything. The whole city climbed the walls to watch. What they saw took most of an afternoon. The 4 ships lashed themselves together into one floating castle, high-sided where the Turkish galleys sat low, and they fought the fleet off their planking hour after hour. The Sultan rode his horse into the shallows, roaring at his admiral. At dusk the wind filled, the castle of ships gathered way, the chain dipped, and they were in. 4 ships, a city eating supper that night on Sicilian grain, believing, for one evening, that the sea would always save it. The Sultan's answer to that afternoon is the reason his name is remembered. He couldn't get his fleet through the chain. So 2 nights later, his fleet went around the chain, overland, over a hill. His engineers had been building, behind the Galata Heights where nobody watched, a road, a cradle track of timber, running from the open water up over the ridge and down to the Horn shore inside the chain, the whole length greased with rendered tallow. In one night, 70-odd light galleys came out of the water onto wheeled cradles, and teams of oxen and men hauled them up the slope. Sails set on dry land to catch the night wind and help the oxen, crews aboard, oars out, rowing the air to a drumbeat. The historian Critobulus, who wrote for Mehmed, gives it one line I've never bettered. A fleet, sailing over the dry land as if on the sea. At dawn, on April the 22nd, the city woke to 70 enemy ships inside its harbor, and the chain still perfect, still unbroken, guarding an empty door. Within days, a bridge of lashed wine casks crossed the Horn's head, floating cannon with it. The Venetians tried a night counterstroke with fire ships a week later. It failed, and it cost a brave captain named Coco and his crew, and the war grew crueler after that on both sides, and I'll leave it there. The arithmetic is what matters. 14 miles of wall, and now all 14 needed watch. There's one more front, and it's the one nobody could see. The war underground. This siege has a basement, friend, and it's my favorite part of the whole 53 days because it was won entirely by one stubborn foreign engineer. The Sultan's army includes miners, real professionals, Serbian silver miners from Novo Brdo, men who spent their lives underground. Their orders: tunnel under the moat, under the walls, prop the tunnels with timber, then burn the props and drop a tower into the hole. It's an old, patient, terrible craft, and against most cities it works. This city, though, had Johannes Grant. The sources can't even agree what he was. A German says one, Scottish says a stubborn tradition. Whatever his passport, he was the best counterminer alive. He set bowls of water along the walls and read the ripples. He hung dried peas on drumheads. He listened to the ground the way a physician listens to a chest, and every time the Serbians came creeping, Grant was somehow already there. 14 mines over the weeks. Everyone found. Everyone broken. Flooded with the city's water, choked with smoke, or met head-on, and there were fights down there. Friend, in tunnels a man can't stand up in. By torchlight, under the moat. Nobody sings about the underground war, because it's hard to make a song about listening. 14. Somewhere under my feet right now, there's a tunnel full of quiet water, and it's as much a rampart as anything I can see from this tower. One more night from the middle weeks, because it's the best single night's work either side managed, and both sides did their best work in the dark. Deep in May, the defenders woke to find a tower against the walls. Not a metaphor, a siege tower, a rolling wooden castle higher than the outer wall, built overnight and rolled to the lip of the moat, while the watch saw nothing, hide-armored against fire, packed with men, with earth, filling the ditch in front of it hour by hour. It stood over the gate of Regium like a bad idea made of timber, and by the next evening the moat before it was half full, and the outer wall's defenders were fighting uphill against a thing looking down at them. That night, the defenders went out. A sortie in the dark with barrels of powder and the fire that this city keeps for emergencies. And somewhere before the middle watch the night went orange. The tower burned the way dry timber and pitch burn, entirely roaring, lighting 4 miles of wall and 10,000 upturned faces, and by morning there was ash, and a redug ditch, and the wall standing clean. The Sultan is said to have sworn that the word of 37 prophets could not have made him believe men could do as he swears at the stockade, you'll notice. The defense keeps astonishing him. That's worth something, friend, even tonight. Especially tonight. Nobody out there thinks this city is easy. Whatever happens by morning, nobody will ever say it was easy. So tally the siege with me. 53 days. The greatest gun on earth. 7 half-ton shots a day. And the wall it broke is standing anyway. As timber and earth and stubbornness mended 52 times. A fleet lifted over a mountain into the harbor, and the seawall still holding, thinned but holding. 14 mines dug, 14 found by a man with bowls of water. A siege tower built against the walls in a single night, burned by the defenders before the next one, assault after assault after assault at this one beach in the back big. This valley, at each one back at the stockade by a vanguard and no AEB by Genoese in white armor and men who by now sleep standing up. By any professional reckoning, the defense is winning. That's the mad truth of tonight, and every captain out there in the dark knows it. Sieges are races, the wall against the treasury, the stockade against the campaign season. There's talk in the Sultan's own tent, and this is documented, of lifting the siege entirely. His oldest vizier has argued for it out loud. Take a tribute, declare victory, go home before the West finally stirs, which is why tomorrow is happening. A 19-year-old who has bet his throne on this city cannot wait out the summer. Everything he has gets spent tonight, all of it, in one throw, before dawn. Third watch of the night, and the score is even after 53 days. Third watch of the night, and everything is still to play for. Sleep if you like, friend. It's a fine night for the last few hours of an empire's luck. Between the bells and the drums, there's a quiet hour, and it wants a quiet story, so let me tell you about the Omens. The last 6 days have been full of them, and I only report what both armies wrote down. That's my rule tonight. 2 enemy camps, keeping the same strange diary. Start with the moon, because everything here starts with the moon. There's a prophecy in this city, old as the walls. Constantinople cannot fall while the moon is waxing. Growing brighter, the city stands. That's the shape of the promise. And sailors and grandmothers have carried it for centuries, and you can decide for yourself what such promises are worth. But on the night of the 27th, May 22nd, sickness moves over this city already dark. The full moon came up with the earth's shadow across it, copper-colored, and for 3 hours the brightest thing occurs to Bruges. 50,000 people watched it from inside Bruges for inside these walls, and every one of them knew the prophecy. The waxing was over. That's Jurgenseg over. That you could hear the city understand it. A sort of murmur running along the streets below the wall. The sound a crowd makes when it stops pretending. I'll say the honest thing, because it's my rule. The moon does this on schedule. It had done it before over this city and meant nothing. But omens aren't about the sky, friend. They're about what a city is already carrying when it looks up. Now, between the eclipse and the icon, the bravest small story of the whole siege, and it happened at sea, and it ended 5 days ago. The 12 who came back. All siege long, the city has held its breath for Venice. The Republic voted a relief fleet. That was known. Ships were fitting out. That was said, and every dawn the sea wall's watch looked south for sails, In early May, the emperor had to know, a brigantine was rigged Turkish fashion and 12 men volunteered dressed as enemies and slipped the boom in the dark and went south through the whole Ottoman fleet to find Venice's answer. They searched the islands for 3 weeks, friend. Empty roadsteads, rumors, no fleet. The relief was real on paper and fatally late in fact, still gathering a month of sailing away. And on that empty sea, 12 men held a council. They had a sound ship, open water, and every reason to run for home. And the record of their vote survives. One man argued for safety and was outvoted, and the boat turned north. Their reasoning, Deadly King, their reasoning, as the accounts give it. The Emperor sent us for an answer, and the answer belongs to him. May the 23rd, they came back through the fleet in the dark, boom, and through the Emperor. No one is coming. And the Emperor thanked each man, the accounts say, and wept, and went back to the wall. They're on the wall tonight, those 12. Somewhere down the line. Delivering a no like that is a loyalty there's no medal for. There should be. Three days later came the icon, and I was there, so I'll just tell you what happened. This city's most sacred possession is a painting, the Hagia, the Virgin who points the way, and the tradition says St. Luke himself painted her. She is the city's protectress, the champion general of the old hymn. When sieges came, they carried her along the walls, and the sieges failed. Every time. For 800 years, she's on the city. 5th of May, they brought her out, and the whole city behind her walked. And in the middle of the procession, on a street she had traveled 100 times, the icon slipped from its platform. Just slipped. And here's the detail every account keeps. The detail that makes it an omen and not an accident. She went to the ground like dead weight, and the bearers could not lift her. For a long moment, the panel would not be raised, as if it had decided to stay down, and then it came up as lightly as ever. Before the procession could steady itself, the sky went black at midday and dropped hailstones in late May. Streets turned to rivers, children knocked off their feet by water. The procession scattered. The Virgin went home early. The next morning, the whole city woke wrapped in fog. Thick sea fog in the last week of May, a thing no one living had seen in that season. The city spent a whole day as a ghost of itself, and that night came the strangest thing of all. That night, the dome of Hagia Sophia wore a light. I want to be careful here, friend, because it's the strangest thing I'll tell you tonight, and it's also the best witnessed. Both armies saw it, and both armies wrote it down. At the base of the great dome, where the 40 windows ring the drum, a glow appeared, and it rose and it gathered at the summit where the cross stands, and it hung there, and then, the accounts agree, it went up, left, rose into the sky, and was gone. In the city, they named it at once. The spirit was leaving the church. The presence that had held the dome for 900 years had risen out of it the way light leaves a window when someone inside picks up the lamp and walks away. And in the camp out there, the Sultan's men saw it too, the whole horizon of them, and their readers of signs told Mehmed, the light is leaving the city and coming to us. Same light, same sky. 2 armies, 1 omen, each certain it meant the other's ending. Cooler heads in later centuries will say the words, St. Elmo's fire, and note the strange weather that week. The fog, the charged air, and they're probably right, and I don't think it matters even a little. Signs are mirrors, friend. 50,000 people saw their fear and 80,000 saw their hope, and the terrible thing is that mirrors can be accurate. The lamps in the dome are lit tonight. It just looks like a church again. It looks like it's staying. Meanwhile, in the camp, the days of omens were also days of argument, and thanks to the Sultan's own historians, we know what was said in the red tent, so come stand in it with me a moment. On one side of the argument, Halil Pasha, the Grand Vizier, the old statesman who served the Sultan's father and never wanted this siege. His case is a professional's case. The walls still stand after 7 weeks. The fleets of Italy may yet sail. Hungary is stirring. A failed assault could break the army and the young Sultan's throne with it. Take the enormous tribute the Greeks would pay, he says, and come away with a victory made of gold. On the other side, the war party, Zagan Pasha loudest. The city has never been weaker. 7,000 exhausted men on 14 miles of wall. There will never be a better night than now. And Mehmed, 19 years old, listening. He had already sent the emperor a last offer. This is documented. Yield the city, and Constantine could leave alive with his court and his treasury, and rule the Morea unmolested. And the answer came back, and the chronicles preserve its spine. The emperor would pay any tribute the Sultan named, but the city itself was not his to give. Not his, nor any man's who lived in it. As long as one defender stood, it was not a thing that could be handed over. Mehmed heard the answer, ended the argument, and gave the order. The assault would come before dawn on the 29th. Tonight. And fairness makes me tell you, the red tent isn't the only tent that argues. The defense quarrels too, and the quarrel is documented and human, and I'd rather you heard it from me. Giustiani and the Grand Duke Notaras, the city's highest-born official, despise each other. Genoese professional, Greek grandee, oil and salt water. Mid-siege, it came to a head over cannon, of all things. Giustiani wanted guns moved from the seawalls to this valley, where the real assault would come. Notaras refused to strip his own command, and the accounts say the words got hot enough that it needed the emperor himself at midnight, standing between two proud, exhausted men. To settle it, there are versions where a threat was spoken that I won't repeat at this hour. Tired men. Friend. 50 days of no relief. No rotation, no margin. The same faces on the same stones. That's the true texturation. That's the true texture of the last days. And I tell it to you for a reason. History likes its defenses unanimous. All one heartbeat at the barricade. Real walls are held by men who annoy each other, by allies who share nothing but the parapet, by committees, friend. Same as everything else in this world. And they hold anyway. That's the miracle worth keeping. Not that the garrison agreed, but that isn't agreed, that it didn't, and stood the line regardless. The emperor's gift these last weeks, and every account agrees on this, was exactly that. Keeping proud men side by side who'd sooner duel. It's a kind of masonry, too. Softer stone. Harder work. So now you understand the silence out there, friend. Let me tell you what the last 2 days looked like from this tower, because the Sultan turned his whole army into a message. 2 nights ago, the lights. At full dark, the entire camp kindled at once. bonfires, torches, candles at every tent. 4 miles of flame from the sea to the Golden Horn, and out on the water every ship burning lights at its rails. So the city was ringed with fire on 3 sides, and with its sound, 80,000 voices, drums, the long horns, prayer and celebration braided together all night. From this parapet it looked like the end of the world had been scheduled and lit accordingly. Men on this wall stood and watched it without speaking. Nothing. The Sultan ordered a day of rest and fasting, and the loudest army on earth went mute. Tools down, voices down, just the smoke of cook fires rising straight in the calm. 4 miles of quiet men getting ready. Fire, then silence. Any soldier can read that sentence, friend. The celebration was for what comes tomorrow, held tonight because tomorrow they'll be too busy. And I'll tell you what I felt. Watching 100,000 enemies pray, it was the same thing our bells are, friend. It's what human beings do the night before the unbearable. On both sides of every wall ever built, the sound is different and the reason is the same. Nobody sleeps before the morning that decides everything, except you. You're allowed. That's the arrangement. Deserters have been coming over the walls all week, in both directions, because every siege leaks, and each one has walked to a captain and asked the only question left: when? Tonight, they all say, past the middle of the night. Before the dawn, before. So the city is doing the last things. The gates between the inner wall and the stockade have been locked behind the forward men. And I want you to sit with that a second, because it's the bravest housekeeping in history. Justiniani's men and the Greek companies are out there in the terrace with the stockade in front of them and 40 feet of their own stone at their backs, locked. No retreat, by their own key. The emperor is at this gate with his household. The Venetians hold the palace quarter, the Genoese the horn end, the Catalans stand down by the old sea palace, and one Ottoman prince, Orhan, holds his stretch with his household troops. 14 miles, 7,000 men, every one of them placed, and now placed is all they are. Somewhere below me a man is making another man memorize an address, in case. The bells have gone quiet, the candles stay lit. The Hagia Sophia is back on her platform, upright, pointing the way she always points. 4th watch of the night, and the omens are all filed. 4th watch of the night, and both cities are pretending to sleep. Stay under the blanket, friend. Whatever this night decides, it has no vote on yours. There. Feel that through the stone. Put your palm on the tower again. Drums. All of them at once. Out of the dark. An hour past midnight. And horns. Over the drums. And under it all that sound I can't teach you. 80,000 men standing up at the same time. The point of the drums is to be heard, friend. Fear arrives ahead of any army. And the city answers. Here come the bells, every church at once, ringing the alarm pattern, wild and hard. Nothing like this evening's prayers and the Semantron boards hammering under them. And the whole dark city below me lights window by window like a hillside of struck matches. Out in the harbor, a Venetian ship's surgeon named Barbaro is standing on deck writing all of it into his diary by lantern. And bless him for it. The world was ending and he kept neat notes. And I'll tell you the detail from the streets that the chronicles keep. The one I want you to hold all through this watch. The civilians came out, toward the walls. Women, old men, children, monks, carrying stones up the stairs, carrying water to the line, carrying planks and hides for the stockade. A whole second army with baskets. Nobody ordered them. The city simply walked to its own edge and put its hands on the wall. The first wave is crossing the moat's fill now. Ladders up out of the dark, like the ribs of something. Stay with me. We watch from here. That's the arrangement, and I keep it. And understand the size of it, friend, because what's hitting the stockade below us is only one finger of the hand. The assault is everywhere at once. That's the whole design. Out on the Marmara, ships are standing in against the sea walls, ladders at their mastheads, fainting, sounding horns, forcing every southern tower to man its parapet and stay there. In the Horn, the fleet that sailed over the mountain is pressing the harbor walls, and the boom is being tested at its ends, and our diarist Barbaro is in that fight this very hour, surgeon on a fighting deck, writing it all down after. Up at the palace quarter, the Blackerneye walls have their own battle. 14 miles, friend, every mile of it burning with noise at once. On purpose, so that no captain anywhere dares send his men to help any other captain anywhere else. That's what 80,000 buys. Not force only, simultaneity. The defense has no reserves, because the defense is the reserves. 7,000 men nailed each to his own 10 feet of stone by a threat that never sits down. And yet, mark it in the tower log because it's true. Everywhere else, everywhere but this valley, the wall is winning. The sea walls hold all night. The horn walls hold. The boom holds. Blackerneye holds. 14 miles minus 100 yards of stockade, friend, and every yard of the rest of it did its 1,000-year-old job in the dark tonight. The city was not outfought. Keep that. We'll need it at dawn. The first wave is the irregulars, and it's the saddest arithmetic of the night, so I'll say it gently and once. They're volunteers, thousands on thousands, gathered to this campaign from everywhere by the oldest advertisement there is, a rich city and a place in the story. Farmers, drifters, fortune hunters, old soldiers of no flag. They are brave, and they are barely armed, and the Sultan spends them first, on purpose. Their job is to tire the defense. That is the whole job, and they don't know it. For 2 hours they come at the stockade in the dark, ladders and grapples and raw shoving, and the stockade holds. Giustiniani's armored men work in rotation, fresh arms always forward, and the terrace does what it was built to do 1,000 years ago. It makes the numbers not matter. Men lean against men in the dark, and go quiet, and are replaced. Understand what the Emperor's captains understand, watching from this wall. None of this is the real assault. This is the question before the question. Somewhere out there in the dark, dry and rested and fed, the real answer is sitting on the grass by its ladders, listening the way we are. 2 hours of the night spent, though. 2 hours of arms spent. The cruelest thing about tonight's arithmetic is that it's working exactly as both sides expect. Nothing has gone wrong yet, friend. Remember this hour later. There was a long time when nothing had gone wrong. The drums change. Second wave, and this one comes with its own light. Anatolian regulars now. The professional army of Asia, armored, drilled, carrying torches, and they come in order, in column, to drums that keep an actual pace. Where the first wave broke on the stockade like surf, this one arrives like carpentry. Ladder teams and shield roofs and men who have done this to other cities. And the great cannon is awake. In the dark, its muzzle flash lights the whole valley, for a heartbeat at a time. The walls, the moat, 10,000 raised faces, all of it printed on the night in one white instant and gone. Somewhere in this hour it lands, the shot the diaries remember. A full section of stockade, timber and earth and barrels, opened in one blow. The breach of the night. And through the dust the column goes for the gap. And this, friend, this 10 minutes, is as close as the city comes to ending before dawn. It doesn't end. I'll tell you exactly why, because a 50-year-old emperor was standing 30 feet from the gap when it opened. Constantine's household closed the breach with their own bodies, while the workers came running with the barrels and the hides. The same repair the city has made 52 nights, done this time in minutes, under assault. By torchlight, the column recoiled, reformed, came again, recoiled. By the 4th hour, the Anatolians poke into the dark, in order, the way professionals leave. Out beyond the moat, the drums go quiet. Not finished. Inhaling. From the other side of the stockade now, one name. Because the Ottoman chronicles keep their own roll of this night and the register rules apply to everyone, friend. Dignity travels both directions across a wall. Hassan of Ulabat, a janissary of enormous size, a giant with a round shield, and in the worst of the push at the stockade, he does the thing that decides battles psychologically before they're decided physically. He goes up and over, first, alone, standard in hand, and plants it on the broken rampart where both armies can see it standing. Understand what the first man over a wall is buying and what he pays. He can win anything alone. He's there to be seen. One silhouette against the sky, where no silhouette has stood in 53 days, proof to 10,000 men behind him that the thing can be done. The defender's stones knocked him down, the chronicles say, more than once, and he rose under his shield and kept the standard up, and then he didn't rise, and by then it no longer mattered to the battle, because 10,000 men had seen the flag stand on the wall of Constantinople, and a fact like that cannot be unseen. His name lived. The chroniclers of his own side wrote it down with honor, and I hand it across 5 centuries with the same. Hassan of Ulabat, who went first. Every wall in this story has men like him on both sides of it. That's what walls are, in the end. The places where the brave of two worlds are introduced. Now the sky at the east rim is going from black to the color of iron, and in that first gray, the third wave stands up, and everyone on this wall knows the shape of what's coming. The Janissaries, the Sultan's own, the professional heart of the empire, raised from boyhood to exactly this hour, rested all night, and they come in silence. No one on this wall will ever unhear it. After 5 hours of drums and roaring, the best troops on earth advanced to run one slow drum, evenly, unhurried, in step, like the tide deciding. Memhed himself rides with them as far as the moat, 19 years old. Everything he has wagered on the next hour, and he walks his best men to the edge of it, personally, and stands there in the gray light. At the stockade, it comes down to what sieges always come down to at the end. A wall of tired men and a wall of fresh ones, pushing at a fence of earth and timber in the half-dark, close enough to share breath. No more waves now, no more rotations. Both sides have spent their reserves. This is everyone, all at once. The Greeks and Genoese have held for 5 hours, and they are holding still. And along this whole valley, the stockade line bends and steadies, like a rope bridge with the wind in it. It is nearly dawn, friend. The night is nearly paid for. And then, in the space of a few minutes, the two accidents happen. The first accident is a wound. Somewhere in that gray pushing, Giustiniani is hit. And here I'll keep my rule about honesty. No two accounts agree on the where or the what. Through the hand, says one. The chest, says another. The shoulder, a bolt, a shot. 6 versions, agreeing only on the man and the minute. After 53 days, something finally got past the armor. It isn't a killing wound, not yet, though it will kill him within weeks. On a ship, off an island called Chios, a Genoese who spent 5 months of his life holding another people's wall, and every hour of this night holding its worst 100 yards. Remember him kindly. The city's own chroniclers mostly don't, and that's the second wound, and I think it's the one that killed him faster. Because here is what happens. In the gray light in front of everyone, Giustiniani, bleeding, asks to be taken off the line. The emperor is beside him within moments, and the old accounts give us the exchange. Stay, Constantine asks him. Your wound is slight. Stay, because the men watch you, and Giustiniani says he'll return when it's dressed. They unlock a gate in the inner wall to carry him through. The gate the men had locked behind themselves on purpose, and his Genoese 700 men who came here for him, not for Greece, see the white armor going through it and follow. The stockade doesn't break, it thins, which is how everything actually breaks. The second accident is a door. Up the line, north of us, where the Great Wall meets the palace quarter at an angle, there's a little postern gate called the Kirkoporta, a service door in all that 1,000-year stone, barely wide enough for 2 men. The defenders have been using it all siege to slip out and raid the flank, and some night this week, after a sortie, the chronicler Ducas is our only witness. Someone came back through last and did not bar it. That's all. That's the entire event. No cannon, no genius. A tired man, a heavy bar, an unfinished chore. In the first daylight, Ottoman soldiers probing that angle find it. 50 of them push through into the terrace, climb an undefended stretch, and raise their standards on a tower of the inner wall, where the whole city can see them. Understand, 50 men on one tower take nothing. They could have been swept off in a quarter hour. But at the stockade, the line has just watched the white armor leave. And now, looking back over their shoulders, they see enemy flags on their own wall in the sunrise. And a cry starts somewhere and runs down the whole 4 miles faster than any man can run. The city is taken. It wasn't quite when the cry began. Cries like that are self-keeping promises. The stockade, thinned once by a wound, breaks everywhere at once, the way ice goes. No particular blow, just the night's whole weight arriving. I'll tell you the Emperor's last hour the way the oldest accounts tell it. Constantine is at this gate when the line breaks. He has maybe a minute of choosing left, and the choice is real. The harbor still holds ships. An emperor's person is worth any ransom. There were captains at his elbow begging him toward the water. Live and be an emperor over the sea. What he does instead is recorded by the men who survived him. He takes off the eagles, the purple cloak, the imperial insignia, everything that makes him worth capturing, worth ransoming, worth displaying. Off onto the stones. His recorded words by an old tradition. The city is taken, and I am still alive. And then the last emperor of the Romans walks into the press at the St. Romanus gate as an ordinary soldier, and no reliable eye ever finds him again. Never found, friend. 1100 years of empire end with a man deliberately making himself indistinguishable from everyone he'd asked to die alongside him. The search parties will look for days. Legends will look for centuries. We'll let one of them into the last watch because it earned its place. The bells are going quiet now, one by one, nearest the walls first, like lamps being carried deeper into a house. 5th watch of the night. The wall I'm standing on was never taken, friend. Write that down. The stockade broke and a door stood open, but this stone under your palm held everything 1,000 years asked of it, tonight included. 5th watch, and the stone is still warm. Stay on the tower with me now, friend, while the light comes gray and the noise moves away into the city, because you and I aren't following it, and this next hour has to be gotten through, and the way to get through it is quietly. Listen to how an ending actually sounds. Not like the histories say. It sounds like bells stopping. One by one, nearest the walls first, each tower going silent mid-pattern, the ringing pulling back street by street toward the sea like a tide going out. By the second hour of daylight, there will be 2 bells still answering each other somewhere down by the harbor. And then one, and then the strangest quiet this city has heard in 1100 years. A morning with no bells at all. The camp outside is empty, friend. Look, 4 miles of tents with their fires dying. The whole horizon's worth of army poured through 3 gates into the streets behind us. Out here, where the war lived for 53 days, there's nothing left but smoke and staked horses, and the great gun cooling on its frame. Done forever. Already turning into a museum piece. Put your palm on the stone once more. Still warm. It held, friend. The men were spent and the fence broke. But the 1,000-year wall was standing when the war went past it, and it's standing now, and it will be standing when you wake. Tonight, your tonight, with laundry strung between its towers. The watch changes at dawn. Ours is nearly done. breathe with the coals a while. Dawn, the 29th of May. And the first thing morning does is open the harbor, so let me start there. After a night like that, you start with the boats, the Mercies first. That's the whole method tonight. The Sultan's blockade crews were sailors with ears. By sunrise, they knew what had happened, and they did what half a victorious army does. They went ashore, toward the prize, and the harbor stood open behind them, chain and all. So through the morning, the ships went out. Barbaro's Venetians warping out with their decks packed with survivors, sailors' families, swimmers pulled dripping from the horn, whoever reached a rope. The Genoese from Galata, the same. They waited in the roads, the accounts say, as long as any hull could dare, for men who might still swim out, and at midday a north wind rose and the fleet ran row for the sea so heavy with people that the freeboard was down near the waterline. Our diarist Barbaro went with them, his notebook in his sea chest, which is why you and I could keep this watch at all 5.5 centuries later. And one mercy more, a strange one. Across the Horn, Galata still stands untouched. By treaty, the Genoese colony spared entire, watching the smoke from its own intact towers. Thousands of lives sit inside that one signature. Some doors out of history stay open on paper, friend, and paper, as I keep telling you tonight, usually wins. City. The crowds went where this city has always gone. Downhill. To the dome. Thousands filled Hagia Sophia at dawn and barred the great bronze doors because of an old prophecy. If the worst ever came, an angel would descend at the column of Constantine, sword in hand, and turn it all back. The angel did not come. I won't follow the crowd through those doors, friend. What happened in the fallen city that morning was what happened to every fallen city of that world, and I keep my register even when history doesn't. I'll stand on the mercies instead, because they're real and documented. And here's the largest one. The custom of that age gave a storm city to its army for 3 days. Mehmed stopped it after 1. By that evening, his heralds were in the streets ordering the plunder ended, and it ended. His own historian says the order held, and when the Sultan himself walked into Hagia Sophia that afternoon and found a soldier prying up marble from the floor, he stopped him with his own hand. The tradition keeps his sentence, and it's a whole philosophy of empire in 9 words. The treasure is yours, the buildings are mine. The great church became a mosque within the week, and because it did, it stood. Stands tonight, friend. 15 centuries old, the dome that watched this whole night still holding its ring of 40 windows over the water. One of the oldest rooms on Earth, still doing its job, whichever name the prayers inside it use. And now the strangest tears of the whole story. And I want you to have them exactly as the record gives them, because you've earned the strange parts by staying with me this long. They belong to the winner. That afternoon, Mehmed rode through his prize. 19 years old, master of the city as people had dreamed about for 800 years, the new Caesar by his own reckoning. He rode through the forum, past the broken statues, through streets his own army had spent the morning emptying, and his court historian Critophilos, who was there to flatter him and instead recorded him, says, "The young sultan looked at it all and wept, and said, 'What a city we have given over to plunder and destruction.' The conqueror, grieving the thing he'd conquered, on the first day he owned it." Hold that a moment, friend, because it's the hinge of everything that comes after. A man who wanted a trophy would have shrugged. Mehmed wanted a capital. He had fallen for the same city he'd broken, the way everyone falls for this city. And from that afternoon forward, his whole reign bends toward one project: putting the lamps back on. The repopulation orders went out within weeks, families summoned from across the empire, Greek ones included, invited, in many cases, back. Markets reopened by decree. The wells and cisterns, those drowned cathedrals we visited in the second watch, inventoried and guarded. You can sack a city in a day, friend. He would spend 30 years proving you can't own one that fast. The fates then, quickly and gently, because a story told with everything owes you the ledger of its people, and then we'll get to the good inheritance. Francis, the counter of the secret census, taken at the fall, ransomed after, and he grew old in a monastery writing the chronicle where the number he kept secret finally got told. The count outlived the counting. Barbaro sailed home with his diary in his sea chest and lived to revise it. Every hour of tonight that you and I have kept, we kept through his lantern. Giustiani reached Chios and died of the wound within days, and his tomb there called him a man of great renown, which was the least of what was owed. And on the winning side, the sharpest lesson of the whole night: victory was not safety. The old vizier who had argued against this war all along was arrested within days and within the season. The young sultan wanted no rival wisdom, standing behind his triumph, and some of the city's great men who lived through the morning did not live out the week, the Grand Duke among them. I won't walk you down those corridors at this hour. The record has it all, and the record can keep it. Take the pattern instead, friend, because it's the pattern that matters. The men of the sword and the men of the council mostly ended badly on both sides. The men with notebooks lived, and their pages beat everybody. Paper wins. It's the oldest result in history, and nobody important ever believes it in time. Here's the mercy nobody expects to find in this story, so listen slowly. Within the year, the Sultan went looking for a monk. Gennadios, the most stubborn anti-unionist in the city, a man who had opposed the deal with Rome even on the walls last night, and who by then was a prisoner in Edirne, sold as part of someone's plunder. Mehmed's men ransomed him, brought him back, and in January of 1454, the Sultan of the Ottomans personally invested him as Patriarch of Constantinople, with ceremony fitted from the old empire's own. The staff, the escort, the formalities an emperor would have used. Sit with the strangeness of that, friend. The church of this city did not die with the city's empire. The conqueror refounded it, chartered it, taxed it, certainly, and used it to govern, certainly, but it stood, and it kept standing. And the line of patriarchs that was walking to Vespers on the night we've just spent together walks in that same city tonight, 570 years later, unbroken. The empire ended. Almost nothing else did. The fishermen went back out. Grain came in. The nickname the Greeks had always used for the place is Tin Polin to the city. Wore itself down over the centuries into the shape you know, Istanbul. Which means the city's newest name is just its oldest habit, friend. For 1,000 years, nobody in this part of the world ever needed to say which city. There was only one. There still is. And the rebuilding, because I promised you the young man meant capital, not trophy, and the receipts came fast. Within 2 years of the morning we've just watched, masons were roofing the first stone vaults of a covered market on the hill above the harbor, a bedestin for cloth and treasure, and stalls gathered around it. And it grew, and tonight, your tonight, that market is the Grand Bazaar. 4,000 shops under one roof, one of the oldest shopping streets on earth. 5.5 centuries of continuous haggling that started while the walls were still smoke-stained. On the old Acropolis Point, where the first Greek town stood 2,000 years before, a new palace began going up in a garden, courtyard by courtyard, taupe copy. The aqueducts were mended. The cisterns, our drowned cathedrals, went right on working. Conquerors change. Plumbing abides. And the people came back, friend. Summoned, invited, some compelled. Greek and Turkish and Armenian, and before the century was out, thousands of Jewish families welcomed in from a Spain that had just expelled them. And the city filled and passed its old size and kept going. Do the arithmetic of the long view with me. This city was a capital under the eagle for 11 centuries, and a capital under the crescent for nearly 5 more. 1,600 years of capital rank, friend. One address. Under 2 empires and 1 god, argued over in 2 languages. No other city on earth comes close. You don't kill a city like that. You inherit it, and it changes your empire more than your empire changes it. Now the books. I promised you in the first watch that paper wins, and here's the payment. For a century before tonight, as the empire shrank, its scholars had been leaving, and they left carrying manuscripts. Plato, Homer, Ptolemy, the mathematicians, the physicians, the historians. Texts the West had lost or never had, kept alive in this city's libraries through the whole long dark by exactly the kind of patient copying nobody builds statues to. After tonight, the leaving becomes a flood. Greek masters land in Venice, in Florence, in Rome, and they do the simplest world-changing thing there is. They teach Greek to Italians from the books they saved. One of them, Cardinal Brazier, born on this empire's soil, spends his life gathering the scattered library, 1,000 codices, and gives the whole of it to Venice, where it still sits, the seed of the Marciana, his reason, in his own words, so that the books should survive shipwreck. He meant tonight, friend. Tonight was the shipwreck. And Italy, right then, was dry tinder for exactly those sparks. Printing presses starting up. Painters looking for older ways of seeing. A whole peninsula in the mood to be reminded what humans used to know. The Renaissance had many mothers, and it was well underway before tonight. But one of its mothers is this city, and part of the inheritance was posted on the last boats out. A city fell, friend, and the lamps came on all over Europe. That's not a consolation prize. That's a resurrection with extra steps. One legend before the light comes, because a story this old gets one, and this is the one the Greeks chose, and after 5 centuries it's still told. They say Constantine didn't die at the gate. They say that at the last moment, as the line broke, an angel took the emperor and turned him to marble, and laid him asleep in a hidden chamber beneath the Golden Gate, the old triumphal arch at the south end of this wall through which emperors entered in glory. The Marble Emperor, they call him. He isn't gone, he's asleep, and when the city needs him he'll wake and take the gate, and things will be set right. The Ottomans heard the story too, and I'll tell you the strange fact that always follows the legend, and you can weigh it however you like at this hour. Within a few years the Golden Gate was walled shut, bricked into the fortress that still stands there, and shut it stayed for 500 years, to this very night. Empires don't brick up doors over nothing, friend. I don't traffic in prophecies, you've heard how they behave tonight. But I'll say this much for the Marble Emperor, watchman to watchman. Every city keeps one sleeper it refuses to wake. Some idea of itself laid up whole, in reserve beneath the oldest gate. That's not superstition. That's just what memory is, when a whole city does it together. Let him sleep. He earned it 1100 years forward and one long night back. And so, incidentally, have you. Full light now, over the water, and I'll finish where a watchman should, with the walls themselves and what became of everything you've watched tonight. The walls are still there, friend. Tonight. Your tonight. 4 miles of them. Towers and terraces, the moat gone soft with gardens running through the middle of a living city of 15 million, holding up washing lines and fig trees and the occasional football. You can stand where the last emperor made himself ordinary and put your palm on stone that was warm on the night of May the 28th, 1453. The chain that guarded the horn, pieces of it rest in the city's Seasame's museums. Iron links, the ones that once shut the world's greatest harbor. The dome still stands over the water. The city never stopped being the city. It just answered, after 11 centuries, to its other name. The old soldier on this wall said it would stand through whatever the summer brings. I've thought about him since, because he was wrong about the empire and right about the wall, and most prophecies land like that, half wrong, and the stone half wins. The night's ledger then, an empire ended, the city did not, the books got out, the church stood, the harbor opened, and the ships ran heavy with the saved. A tired man forgot to bar a door, and a young man wept at his own victory, and a wall held for 1,000 years and then held anyway. Morning watch, and the watch is over. Sleep well, friend. I'll see you at the next gate, wherever the night needs a lantern.